Biceps Slicer and why it does more than hurt. This particular technique is relatively rare in combat sports. However, when it is used, it can result in some spectacular finishes. In this video, we will talk about the Biceps Slicer. It also has names such as Biceps Crusher or Cutter. These names certainly describe how it feels. The submission could also be called the forearm breaker. I recently overheard people talking about the submission, and they were classifying it as just a pain submission. One that would not cause any real damage, and one that people should not tap to because they could tough it out. I hope to educate you all on how this is more than just a pain submission. I will talk about the anatomy involved and how to make the submission work better for you from an orthopedic surgery perspective. To do this, we're going to have to talk a little about physics. Don't worry, I hope to make it interesting. We'll be talking about the Biceps Slicer today. Stay tuned for my sister video on calf slicers, knee slicers. They'll be coming soon. So, I'm a black belt and an orthopedic surgeon, and I want to talk to you a bit more about this submission. First, the involved anatomy of the Biceps Slicer. You have the big arm bone, the humerus, meeting up with the radius and the ulna to make the elbow joint. The humerus and the ulna make up a joint that is fairly well supported by bone in addition to ligaments. Structurally, you can think of these bones as cylinders. There's a hard cortical bone on the outside and relatively soft inside. A cylinder's resistance to bending is proportional to the radius to the fourth power. This means that a bone with a cortex that is 2 times thicker will actually resist bending 16 times better. This is important for understanding which bones are going to break. Along the front of the humerus, you have the biceps and the brachialis muscles. They help you flex the elbow and bring your hand towards your shoulder. Along the front of the radius and ulna into the forearm, you have the flexor muscles that allow you to flex your wrist and your fingers and to pronate your forearm. So how does the submission work? By creating a lever, a force multiplier. Levers are incredible tools. You use levers every day. This submission is just one more example. By jamming your leg or your arm between your opponent's humerus and forearm, you're creating a fulcrum. There are lots of ways of doing this. You are then levering force from the long end of the lever. The force is then sent towards the short end of the lever, towards the elbow joint. The weakest link in the chain of structures being stressed by this submission are the muscles and the forearm bones. The elbow joint compared to the knee joint is relatively stable, so other things are going to fail first. Different story when talking about knee slicers, calf slicers. The biceps and brachialis and forearm muscles are crushed where the fulcrum is. And this hurts. You could get muscle tearing, but what can also happen is the muscle is mushed out of the way and the force starts going into the bone if you've fought the submission that long. As force builds, something is going to fail, and bones do not like being bent. The bones of the forearm are much smaller than the humerus, and as we talked about, are much more likely to fail when put under bending stress that they see at the fulcrum. So, how can you make the submission more effective? The longer the lever arm, the more force can be applied. By getting your fulcrum as close to your opponent's elbow, you're going to generate the most force. Another way of potentially creating more damage is to have their forearm in a neutral position. pronation, supination, neutral. This actually closes the space down and makes things tighter. You can feel this by placing something in the crook of your elbow and moving your forearm through supination, neutral, and pronation. You can feel it's a lot tighter when the forearm is in neutral. It also takes force that might have been spread out to the ulna and the other forearm muscles and focuses it on a much smaller area. More force into a smaller area, more pain, more damage. This is sometimes hard to do, as controlling your opponent's forearm rotation is not always possible by how you approach the submission. However, there's another thing you can do. If you're using your arm as the fulcrum, you can turn your forearm into neutral. This takes up more space, focuses the force of the fulcrum into a smaller area. So, clearly, these submissions can be effective and do real damage. Remember to really jam your limb in the elbow joint to create a longer lever arm, which creates a more powerful lever. And being able to move your forearm and or their forearm into neutral makes it tighter, faster. The Biceps Slicer has a special connection for me, as the very first jiu-jitsu tournament I won, I was stuck in this submission, but was able to wait it out and got the win. And it was me icing my arm on top of the podium. So, be careful with your training partners. Recognize the trouble you are in if you're caught in the submission. But get after it. Let's keep moving.